A message to the fans in Manhattan. We wanted to take a moment to connect with the loyal and passionate fan base that is the New York Rangers fans to say it's not a rebuild, it's a retool. Potato, potato. The Rangers will be cleaning house, starting with Artemi Panarin, most likely, who is not going to get a contract. I know this is a Devils show. I know I'm a Devils reporter, but come on. These are the guys right across the Hudson, and this is breaking news. And this is, oh my God, they're throwing in the towel in the 2025-26 season. I think we all saw this coming. So for today, the Devils fans have a victory lap to take in terms of the tankathon, right? The Devils aren't there yet. Will they be there? I don't think they want to be. We got a lot to discuss today on the Devils Rink Report. Hello, everybody. My name is James Nichols, your host for this Friday, January 16th edition, halfway through January already. Can you believe it? Of the Devils Rink Report. And we have special guest Dimitri Filipovic coming to the show later today. He will bring his genius to the show because I'm not the smartest man booking back-to-back geniuses, Shayna Goldman last week, and Dimitri Filipovic this week to speak hockey, specifically New Jersey Devils hockey, with us. But certainly we will have two very smart guests back-to-back with Dimitri coming on later today. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Devils before we get into our guest today. And this morning on the ice reveals that, you guessed it, Dougie Hamilton staying in the lineup against the Carolina Hurricanes tomorrow on Saturday when the Devils host the Hurricanes, and he will stay alongside Brendan Dillon. That has made for a pretty good pair, actually, and we're going to talk later about, Dougie Hamilton and his whole situation and what's going on there. But he will stay in the lineup because, look, I mean, you know what's going on with Hamilton, but the Devils have a playoff position to continue to battle for. They're only a couple points out. They're only 5 points out. And, there's not too many teams between them and the wild card. But the Devils, look, we're going to talk about this later, too. We spoke with Tom Fitzgerald face to face in a roundtable availability with select media. And, he did say that playoffs are F yeah. That's still the goal. And we're going to try to get better. And we'll talk about all of the Tom Fitzgerald takeaways in a few moments. But as of tomorrow, or this morning at morning skate at practice, Dougie Hamilton stays with Brendan Dillon. So what does that mean? Well, Jonathan Kovacevic is coming back in the lineup too. Somebody's got to come out then, right? They could go 11-7. I've seen that happen to be some suggestion on social media earlier today, but no. It is not 11-7. It is instead Simone Nemec sitting again. So he will be out tomorrow. It will be Jonathan Kovacevic and Dougie Hamilton in. Quick note to my producer here, Sean. Dimitri says he has not gotten a link. Maybe he didn't get it in his email, but Dimitri Filipovic is joining us. I'll see if I can get it over to him myself. But Dimitri Filipovic is trying to come on the show momentarily. But he'll arrive in just a few moments. So yes, Kovacevic and Hamilton in. Simone Nemec is out tomorrow. And look, Sheldon Keefe explained this is tough conversations that they're having on a daily basis. It is something that, they look at and they say, we have 7 bona fide defensemen. And this is, how it's going to go for tomorrow against the Hurricanes. But it's not easy. Simone Nemec wants to play every day, but so does Jonathan Kovacevic, who's, recently returned from injury. And so does Dougie Hamilton, who has a lot to prove on whether he's going to stay. He's not going to stay, or whether he's going to be traded. And he's got to rise his stock to go to a team that perhaps he does want to go to. So we will see what happens on that front. Other notes, Colton White. I keep saying that. I've been saying that for a long time. I can't shake the habit. That is a former Devil, but Colin White is on waivers this afternoon, as is Jonathan. Juho Lammikko. And I do kind of wonder about White. A lot of us watched White closely over the past several weeks. Actually, you could even say months. He's been in the lineup for a long time, and he was solid, man. A defensive defenseman. Nothing too flashy, but he was just reliable. He poised and he helped keep the puck from danger. And you just really liked what he brought, and kudos to him. Coming in a tough situation and playing in place of a lot of injuries, and kind of played his way out of a conversation to come out of the lineup. He was pretty much a lock for several weeks there, and now he's on waivers. So you kind of wonder if there are other teams that are looking at a guy like Colin White and saying we could use a guy like that, a steady presence who. You could throw on your third pair and not have to worry about his defensive game. Juho Lammikko is on waivers. I don't expect anything to come of that. I expect him to make it through. And if somebody claims him, more cap space for Fitzgerald to work with as he tries to continue to pursue somebody to reel in and help this team get those goals that they have been missing for quite some time. Not that much cap space. It's like 850K, but hey, more is more for this team, right? They have little to none. But standing by now is Dimitri Filipovic of the Hockey PDOcast. He joins me now. And Dimitri, it's great to have you on. We've been talking about this for a little while, and we're excited to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's great to finally catch up, and I'm looking forward to today's chat.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just telling the audience earlier, I'm not the smartest man for having a genius come on the show. And last week I had another genius in Shayna Goldman that you guys are both gonna, in having these conversations, make me sound like a caveman when it comes to hockey. But I appreciate you coming on, and I know you're pretty tuned in to the Devils. You've had a lot of conversations with Brendan Dillon specifically, and others in the past. In fact, you have one coming up soon, correct?
Yeah, the Devils, as they go out west, I believe next week, are going to be in town here in Vancouver. So the plan is to get together and have them back on the show for a bit of a midseason catch up. So it's nice to see the Devils bounce back a little bit at home, won a couple games against the Wild and the Kraken, because I feel like with the way things are headed, I don't know if he would have been in the best mood to chat. But now that things are back on the rails a little bit, at least for the time being, it should be fun.
Yeah, for sure. And he's an emotional guy, but he's a great guy, and I love talking to him in the locker room all the time. And I love having him. I love hearing him on your airwaves. It's always a good show when he's on. So, but let's start here. You mentioned the Devils getting a bounce back couple wins here after that horrendous road trip. But listen, the thing that's notable to me is it's back-to-back wins against playoff position teams. Is that fool's gold, or what do you think? Can the Devils turn this thing around here?
I think the game against the Kraken might be so, because while technically you're correct, they're hovering around the playoffs or in a playoff spot at the time. I don't necessarily view them on a true talent level as such. I think they've been one of the luckier teams in the league. It's nice that they're going to be on the schedule for the Devils coming up as well once they visit Seattle during that West trip. The win against the Wild was impressive though, right? And I entered that one. I was not talking about this on my show right after the game. It starts off with pretty sloppy defensive play, I thought. Like, the Wild got a couple looks in tight. They just happened to miss the net on them. And I was like, oh, here we go again. It's going to be a disaster. And then they tightened it up. They started converting on their own opportunities. Dougie Hamilton and Andre Palat, of all people, went off offensively in that one. And I think that was a much needed effort from them. So I think just scoring goals in general, regardless of the opposition, is imperative, and they'll take it wherever they can get it now. So we'll see how the upcoming game against the Hurricanes go. That's going to be an entirely different test, in my opinion, but I'm looking forward to it to see if there's legit bounce back potential here, or if it was just fool's gold.
So let's talk about the finish that you said that they need, right? Like, is that their biggest need? Like, going forward, Fitzgerald said he wants to add up front, and clearly, I mean, you look at the numbers, I think they're the lowest in expected goals. It's just not going well for them in the scoring department right now. Is that their biggest need? And if it is, like, who do you look at out there who's potentially even available to say that's the fit for them that would help fix not everything, but at least a lot of things that are not going well for them right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly think at this point, and I don't think Devils fans are going to want to hear it, but it's probably more of an off-season thing because I think at this point, like I'm sure anyone would help in the top six in particular, but I think if there's going to be meaningful change, like it's going to need to be not a blockbuster necessarily, but like a legitimate guy of substance who makes a bunch of money, who's going to be a featured player on this team, playing alongside Brad and Hughes in particular to maximize the minutes for those guys. And that's the type of player that's probably more likely to be available in the offseason. I've talked about how Jason Robertson was essentially made in a lab to check all of
Right.
those boxes, right? He's used to playing with fast puck dominant guys in Rupe Hintz in Dallas. He's an elite finisher. He's defensively responsible. He's great around the net. He'd be the perfect line mate for those guys with the position the Stars are in, competing for a Stanley Cup. He's almost surely not going to be available between now and the deadline, but needing a new deal this summer, maybe he's someone that could potentially shake loose. So that's kind of the range of player I'd be looking for to like actually speed this thing up and move it in the right direction. Any finisher is going to be valuable though. To your point, like the comparing their actual goals versus expected goals this year, they've been one of the least efficient teams in the league. They are getting looks, maybe not as much as we'd like to see from them, but still more than being the 32nd team in 5-on-5 scoring. And so just having guys who, when Hughes and Brad are dancing around the offensive zone, give it to them in the high danger area, you can't let those opportunities go to waste. And guys like Palat or Nason previously or Paul Cotter at times have done so time and time again. And so that's something that's imperative for the Devils to fix moving forward.
Certainly. And you know, it's funny, like you hear these conversations. I think it was even brought up today, and you can let me know your thoughts on this. There was a proposed trade, and again, sometimes these trade scenarios can get, maybe out of hand, or maybe they're spot on. Who really knows? But a lot of talk about a guy like Steven Stamkos and if there could be a fit there with him, and could they make the Hamilton thing work where they swap those monies, those dollars, and perhaps send a few pieces their way in exchange? Like, is that the kind of thing they should be looking for, or is it more to something like you said, where maybe they be a little bit more patient here, wait till the offseason and go for a guy like Robertson, or should they try to salvage this season and say, hey, Stamkos might be a guy who's available, let's do that?
I think it would depend on the price, certainly. If it was purely like a money in, money out type of thing without necessarily premium features that didn't prevent you from making the types of moves I want to see in the offseason, I'd entertain it. I'm not sure what to make of what you're going to get from him as a player right now, right? Like it was such a slow start for him. He just was not really moving the needle at all. Then they put him with O'Reilly and Forsberg atop the lineup, and he goes off and scores his 600th career goal and has looked much better recently. Yet a lot of his production is going to become from catch and shoot from that left circle and on the power play in particular. Now, that would be a very valuable skill set for this Devils team, but isn't necessarily like a play driving guy who's going to benefit from playing up tempo and with pace. And I think is going to need to be sheltered a little bit. So especially playing the types of minutes you'd expect Brad and Hughes to be playing and their line mate be playing accordingly with them. So I don't love the fit from that angle, but just as a shot maker, that is the type of player they need. So I think it would all depend on price. I'm more open to it now than I was a month ago when he was really struggling. At the same time, though, I would still have, I think, bigger ambitions than that because you want to salvage the season, certainly, and don't want to miss the playoffs. I want to give yourself a chance to get valuable reps for these guys, but you also want to keep in mind the next 3 to 5 years as opposed to just the rest of this one.
Yeah, so the proposed deal there, I think in full, if I remember correctly, was from New Jersey, Hamilton, Casey, and Cody Glass in exchange for Stamkos and Justin Barron at half retained for Barron just to make the money fit there. Justin Barron, a young defenseman, you're sending a young one in, Seamus Casey and Cody Glass, swapping the contracts for Stamkos. Seems like a lot to me.
The thing that I love about that is what are we like a year and a half removed from Barry Trotz paying to dump
Right.
and then now him being involved in this deal and being viewed as a net positive asset. I like Casey. I think he's very valuable. I mean, we see the dearth of right shot defensemen available in the league, and someone should pay a premium for that if you're going to move him in a deal. So that is pretty pricey. At the same time, I think the Devils still, if they did that, would retain whether it's Nemec or obviously their picks to entertain some sort of a future deal when they have more leverage financially and contractually. So I don't hate it, but I'm not sure what the upside is with it. Even if Stamkos comes in and starts scoring goals, whether you're going to beat a Carolina in a round 1 or round 2 matchup in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's a great point, and that's one of the things that they have to get over. That hurdle is the Carolina Hurricanes, and it's interesting. They're not a team that's filled with superstars. They're just filled with a bunch of workhorses led by a workhorse. So you wonder if they can get over that hurdle as soon as starting tomorrow, because that's who they have. They're hosting at the Prudential Center. But one of the things that we just mentioned is Hamilton, right? And his name obviously in the rumor mill. We saw what happened last weekend when it came to the public and his agent comment on it, and the GM commented on it, and just the thing seems like right now is that he's going to be traded. Should they be doing that though? I mean, you saw how he reacted essentially after he was benched, and 2 incredible games from him. Now it could just be a quick boost, or maybe he's rejuvenated long term. But is that something they should be doing now at this time? I don't know if they can backpedal, but they have ambitions to make the playoffs. Is this the move?
Yeah, it's tough to see them making a move where they send Dougie Hamilton out and are better for it the rest of this season. I know he hasn't produced before these last 2 games the way I think we've become accustomed to and you'd expect from a $9 million defenseman. I think the context of his usage is very important, though, right? Especially with all the time Brett Pesce missed. They leaned on him and Siegenthaler to such a large degree defensively. It's been the toughest deployment of his career pretty much. And I thought defensively he held up much better than you typically associate with Dougie Hamilton. It came at the expense of his offense. Some of that is environment driven, where even if you make the right play as a defenseman on this team, the guys up front aren't necessarily converting on it. And so you're not going to get a lot of secondary assists as a defenseman on this group. But I'm with you. I think the last 2 games he's played were probably the 2 best games he's played all season. And so it's a remarkable sort of response, I guess, to the benching or a healthy scratch from him. And I'd like to see what he'd look like in particular now that they're getting healthier in the blue line. If you're going to play Kovacevic with Siegenthaler moving forward, we saw him playing a little bit with with Brendan Dillon, I think, in the Wild game, easing up on his minutes a little bit, giving him more opportunities to cook, because maybe if you get more out of him on that end, that could alleviate some of the offensive struggles you've had up front and might almost be a bit of an internal fix for you the rest of the season.
Certainly, yeah. And it's one of those things where if Hamilton goes, you're looking at Simon Nemec to be the full-time guy, right? He's going to be sitting tomorrow. That was revealed this morning at practice. But you're looking at him being the guy to step in and be that guy every day. Can he replace him in that way? I mean, it's funny. We saw him do it his rookie year where Hamilton was out long-term and Nemec stepped up and essentially made it a softer blow. It wasn't as, it wasn't Dougie Hamilton, especially the year after he scored 74, 75 points, but it made it a softer blow. So you wonder if he can handle it. I want to transition here, though, to the head coach. And one of the questions when I sat down with Fitzgerald the other day, I asked him, is the coaching staff safe, specifically, Sheldon Keefe? He says they're in lockstep. And what's your assessment on his body of work so far as the Devils head coach? And is he the right fit for this team?
Yeah. I mean, I should preface it by saying I've generally been a fan of Sheldon Keefe's work. I thought he did an awesome job in Toronto. I thought he was a great hire for them when he came in. I think he generally, just because he's on the younger end of the NHL head coaching spectrum, I think he's sort of thought of as, and he came from the Leafs that had Matthews and Marner and Tavares and Nylander. He's thought of as like this more modern kind of progressive offensively oriented coach. And that's really not what he is. Like, I think,
right,
at its root, like, he's more of a defensive guy. He was responsible for the Leafs really getting better defensively over the years while he was there towards the end of the tenure. And that's clearly the way he wants his Devils team to play. I'm not sure that's ideal for this current personnel group and probably explains part of the offensive struggles at 5-on-5. Yet I would put more of the blame on the management group and them kind of dragging their feet the past couple off seasons, not meaningfully improving this team up front, not finding a solution for that top line with Hughes and Bratt. And I think that's been a bigger issue than the coaching. I think you can only do so much with the personnel you're given. And so that's the direction I'd lean in. But I get the frustration because it's been a lot of the same issues recurring. You see him keep Markstrom in for all 9 goals against the Islanders. The following game against the Penguins, I was pretty surprised watching that one. They're down 4-1, I think, and he showed no real interest in pulling the goalie or trying to get back in that game. He was almost like, well, this is a lost cause. We're just going to move on to the next one. And people are getting frustrated. They want something to change. And I get why you'd point to the coach. It's easier to do that than a GM change in season with how respected Fitzgerald is and sort of the resume, not the resume he has, but I guess the stock he has in this organization right now. So I'm not sure. I don't know. What's your take on that in terms of how much of this you put on Keefe and how easy of a fix that would be? Because I feel like you could bring in another coach, but it would probably be more of the same unless you change the guys up front.
That's exactly how I feel. I think that if it's going to be the same parts, and what is that next coach going to have to work with? We came into this season kind of knowing that the Devils had a need at top six forward. You couldn't continue to, roll out Andre Palat next to Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes on the first line. It was something that they were going to have to figure out. You weren't sure if you can completely trust Cody Glass as a third line center. Still not even sure if you can do that. I mean, he's been doing really well as of late, and he has really great defensive metrics. But he's probably a high profile 4C to me and a low profile 3C, whereas you can probably go out and get somebody like maybe a Ryan O'Reilly who would slot in perfectly behind, Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier in the depth chart. So those were clear needs that I think were just scoffed at in conversation with him, which I wasn't sure why that was the assessment. And he did explain he thought it was going to come internally. He thought guys like Dawson Mercer were going to step up and score, 30 goals and replace Tyler Toffoli from 2 seasons ago. I keep banging this drum. My audience is probably sick of me hearing this, but they never replaced Tyler Toffoli, who was scoring at a 35 goal pace when they traded him 2 seasons ago. So, something like that, he did say he thought was going to come to fruition, never did. And now he's stuck in this situation where he needs to go externally and look for it all. So, it's going to be interesting. I got my last one here for you, Dimitri, and then we'll send you on your way. Thank you for your time. But we look at, and this was a question not for myself, but to Fitzgerald from one of my colleagues, Daniel Lamoya, who said to Tom, like, hey, is this the situation because you've gotten maybe too far away from your former selves in 2022, 23? Like, can you get back there? And do you see this roster when you look at them and say they have the right base here for it? They just need to add some pieces to get back to that style of play.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, I don't know how anyone could argue with that. Like we've seen this time and time again, right? Probably one of the most difficult hurdles to clear for any organization is you go through that like young and fun phase where everyone's so full of hope and you're like, all right, we're going to lose in the playoffs, but a couple of years from now, with all this experience, once we're in our prime, it's going to be a different story. We're going to get over to the mountaintop. And then you lose in ugly fashion the way they did to the Hurricanes in round 2 in that season. And you're like, oh man, well, we can't get there playing this way. We really got to tighten it up, become more defensively responsible, get heavier, stronger, those types of player prototypes further down the lineup. And so that's exactly what they did. It's reflected. And part of this is Jack Hughes has missed so much time the past 2 regular seasons, but they're generating way less off the rush than they did that season when they were the number 1 team in the league. And those are the areas where the top players in your team are going to be most likely to succeed, but also as a team, you're just generally going to create more offense. And so I think that's a very easy thing to point to and be like, that's probably the biggest differentiator between this current group and the one that really captured our hearts in 22-23.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and that again, they went from a run and gun style, very high skill, high energy, high speed, to now, looking at the roster, I feel like Keefe felt almost like he had to resort to this defensive style, and they got the goaltending that they, supposedly were going to get all this great support from, which we've seen this season how that's gone. It's been very inconsistent, and it's just not the same team, certainly, that it was a few years ago. And who knows, maybe a piece or two can change that. I don't know if adding a 35-year-old Steven Stamkos is that answer, but we will see in due time. But Dimitri, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. For anybody who maybe wasn't here a little bit earlier, just plug yourself for what you got coming up and anywhere else that we can find you and listen to you. And you do great work. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you, man. It was awesome to finally do this. Looking forward to the next time we chat already. You can find me, as the graphic says there, at Dim Filipovic online. Check out the Hockey PDOcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We put out about 2 or 3 shows a week, cover the Devils disproportionately. So I feel like even if you're just a fan of the team and you don't want national coverage necessarily, tune in, because chances are we're probably going to be mentioning the Devils, at least in passing. People are giving me a hard time about it, why I'm covering them so much, but I'm just hopeful. I love that 22-23 team so much. I romanticize it so much. I still think the core of this team with the right moves is capable of being a legit contender. And so I'm going to keep covering until I finally see that change that I want to see in them.
It's great stuff, Dimitri. Thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll definitely talk soon.
All right, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers. That's Dimitri Filipovic, and there he goes. So thanks so much to him for coming on. And as you can well hear, he is a very, very smart man. So thank you to him once again for coming on the show. All right, so we're going to get to the rest of the show. We got a lot to talk about, obviously, with the Dougie Hamilton situation that started to play itself out last weekend. We sat down with Tom Fitzgerald. We can talk about that, of course, as well. And then there were some games that happened between now and then. So just as a reminder, though, we always, by the end of the show, get to your questions at the end in the chat. So if you have anything that you want to say, anything you want read on the stream, answered live, get it in the chat. Do it now. Also, if you haven't done so yet, and you're here and you're new to Devils Rink Report, please smash that subscribe button. The closer we get to 1,000 subscribers, the more opportunity you will have to listen to us, because if we hit 1,000, we're going to go on RSS feeds on your favorite podcast platforms, and you'll be able to listen to us in your cars, and you don't have to look at my ugly mug every day. I need a haircut. Look at this beard. It's getting a little too long, a little too scratchy. So you can hear us in your cars as soon as we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So for now, if you're new here, please smash that subscribe button. Please like the video, and thank you so much for being here and participating in this community. And if you could, ask your questions in the chat. We get to as many as we can by the end of the show, and if you want to hear yours, put it in there now. And any comments too, anything that we can comment on back to you, are also welcomed today. So all right, let's talk about the Dougie Hamilton saga as it gets deeper. So as I mentioned earlier in the show, he's going to be staying in the lineup. And why is that? Look, man, Dougie Hamilton's playing the best hockey he's played all season, and it's not like, oh, he's just been better. Like, no, he's been number one defenseman, Dougie Hamilton, kind of again. Like, he had multiple primary assists in the past couple games. I believe it's 3. He's been really active in the offensive zone. And like, we have had a lot of discussion this season on how his defensive game has been better. And, it's not like a stalwart defenseman type caliber play that you're seeing from him in his own end, but he's at least been somewhat reliable. You do want to see a little more, fight in him, a little more bark, a little bit more elbow grease in him. But overall, I mean, you take what you're getting out of Dougie Hamilton right now in terms of performance, and you're okay with what he offers defensively. And in fact, it's even been a little bit better than in years past. But regardless, he's been playing some of the best hockey he's played. So yeah, you can't really take him out right now. He's motivated. And even if that's for trade purposes, or if that's for just staying in, the lineup purposes, it doesn't matter. A motivated Dougie Hamilton's only going to benefit the Devils. And that's what they need right now. They need to win games. And in order to win games, you need your best players. And Dougie Hamilton is their best defenseman, and at least in the last 2 games, right? I know it's been a long season. How long can this fire stay lit under him? Who knows? We'll see tomorrow if it's still there, and I would think it should be. But until he is traded, if it happens in season, I don't know if you can sit him anymore if he continues to play this way. Now, if it wanes, of course, sit him, put Nemec back in, and make sure that you're taking care of your young guy who you think that you have some future with here. We'll talk a little bit about what I mean there later as well. But again, tomorrow, Kovacevic is back in the lineup. That's going to displace Nemec. Hamilton was a healthy scratch earlier for performance reasons, according to the team. But let's talk about what happened on Sunday, right? JP Barry comes out, his agent, and says that he's being scratched for what he thinks is business management. And the response is, and he criticized, the Devils for doing so. The response from Fitzgerald, we all saw, was, no, this is the business of our lineup. So a war of words there, right? You have to figure out a situation here. Can this be mended between the Devils and Dougie Hamilton? I'm not sure. Is he sitting there and sulking? Is he sitting there and not playing the game that you think he needs to play in order to either 1, help the Devils be successful, or 2, raise his trade stock? No, he's doing exactly that. So now listen, there have been a couple of times where we've gone to him in the room as media and tried to speak with him. He has politely declined, and I want to emphasize politely. He is a very polite man. And it's not that he doesn't want to, or it's not that he's hiding from anybody. It's just that he has spoken a lot this year. I have spoken to him about um his current situation, and I asked him when it was revealed that there were trades nixed in New Jersey. He spoke about that a little bit too. So it's not that he's hiding, it's just that there's a lot that's been going on, and it wasn't his turn necessarily to speak in the recent the recent availabilities. Now, do I think that he should have come out and gotten ahead of it? Yeah, I do, but certainly that didn't happen. And look, these players have that choice. Do I think it's the right choice? Not necessarily. I think he probably should have spoke on it, but he also has spoken on some other things before as well. So I'll give him a slide on this one. But the longer he's around, he's going to have to come out and talk again, right? So one of the things that was revealed as well, by the way, was that he nixed a trade to the San Jose Sharks. And you kind of wonder about that now. You wonder about the Sharks, if they're a team that's still interested, because I think after that, went out and got John Klingberg, and he's cut from the same cloth. But you look at the Sharks roster and you say, well, they got no defenseman signed after next season. So maybe that's something that does still interest them. And, you look at the success they've had this year and Macklin Celebrini and wanting to add to that. And maybe that's something that Dougie Hamilton would be interested in. So we will see, if that's something that that does get revisited, whether it's now or if it's in the summer. But I want to mention one thing. I didn't report this. It was something that was reported by, I believe, Greg Wyshynski, where he had said, he was told and he heard that Tom Fitzgerald was not the guy at the time of the signing who wanted Dougie Hamilton. It was really ownership's call that said, hey, try to go out and get the top free agent in the pool. And, apparently Fitzgerald didn't want to do that, but it came top down and he did it. So I echoed, hey, on Sunday when this all came down, I heard the same thing, and I left it alone until it was reported later that, someone had heard the same thing. And again, I want to stress that, like, you know, uh, I'm not, obviously we don't reveal our sources, and I do stand by what I said, but I did get a little pushback on that. And, somebody had told me, like, hey, listen, that's not true. But you got to read between the lines of these situations, right? It comes from one, national media publicly, and then two, I heard the same thing, and again left it alone on Sunday. But when I heard that it came to light, and I was like, wow, this did come from somebody I did trust. I just didn't think I needed to add a log to the fire. And now that somebody who I think is certainly reputable, and Greg Wyshynski says it, yeah, that I think that context is important. So I did say, and I stand by, having heard that it wasn't Tom Fitzgerald who initially wanted um, Dougie Hamilton. It was ownership. Now, in the reverse, when it comes to Andre Palat, we're told that he did want Palat, but the analytics department did it. So that's a very interesting situation that you're seeing there unfold, with some of the decisions that were made by Tom Fitzgerald. So let's talk about the Devils GM, because we were told, only a few days prior to Tom Fitzgerald speaking, sort of an embargoed thing, that Fitzgerald's going to talk, and the cameras we thought were going to be off, but then they wound up rolling them. Didn't do it live, but they rolled the cameras. And yes, he spoke with a handful of us who were there, and it was mostly everybody that needed to be there. It was myself, Ryan Novozinski, it was Daniel Amoya, Amanda Stein, Christy Flannery, all the contingent that's there pretty much daily. And look, he addressed it and started with, this season is on me. It's on myself first and foremost, because I constructed this roster, and it just hasn't been good enough. So you give him credit for coming out and getting ahead of it and saying right away, it's his fault. But there was a firing squad, for lack of a better term. It was, starting with Ryan and then myself and, Daniel and Peter Baugh and, just a lot of questions. Steve Politi, like, a lot of questions on the roster construction and the no trades and Jacob Markstrom. So we're going to get into all this right now. Um, it was important for him to speak, but you can read from his body language, you can hear in the tone, there was a bit of nerves there. I think there was certainly a bit of nerves there because, we've come to the point where we know he's safe for the season. But after this season, there's going to be, I think, a reevaluation of what's going on here. We were so good 2 years ago, 3 years ago in 22, 23, and now ever since have only taken steps backwards. And look, it's no secret that the Panthers won the Stanley Cup, and this is a copycat league, right? And the Devils try to copy that formula. Except for the problem with that is the Devils don't have the horses to be the Florida Panthers, and that's okay. There's not only one way to win in this league, but he certainly Tom Fitzgerald did not add to the strengths of the Devils, which is why you're seeing them in the situation they're in right now. So a lot of the question was geared toward the roster construction, which he took accountability for. His answers about his job overseeing everything, like scouting meetings, draft, and stuff like that, they're partly true, right? Like he doesn't make the final decision unless he gets some sort of intel from his scouting department. I know there's a lot of questions about that and how they've drafted, and they could have had better pieces to utilize in trades. So that's something that he spoke about. That yeah, although he doesn't make those final decisions, I'm sorry, he doesn't make those decisions alone. He makes the final decision. So I mean, where is he going with drafting an Alexander Holtz instead of a guy who I can't remember who was in that draft, but just let's say, for instance, it was a Buium. Like Buium didn't go till round or pick 11, where I think that year actually might have been the Silayev draft, right? Where Buium went at 11, Silayev went to the Devils at 10. Like you could have had Zeev Buium, who's by the way in the NHL now full time, and was part of a major trade to get Quinn Hughes. You could have had that guy, right? So there's a lot of questions about his scouting department. The next question was about, and from Ryan Novozinski, he did a great job. The the Jacob Markstrom extension. Ryan was pretty forward with him. Why did you rush into it? And he said, "Well, I don't think I rushed into it. I think that I've been talking to his camp about that ever since we acquired him. And whereas that might be true, it was pretty obvious what was happening at the beginning of the year. And look, we talk about Markstrom's sample size. He starts slow all the time, and he has to work his way into being consistent. Um, Sure, but those complications at a younger age are only going to get harder when you're older. And he's now a 35-year-old goaltender who has yet to even begin his new 2-year extension. Now, don't get me wrong. In the past couple starts for Jacob Markstrom, he's looked great. Has he had the biggest body of work? No. In the last game, I think he had 17 saves on 19 shots, but he gave up 2 goals on 19 shots. Still not horrible, but you know, Jacob Markstrom has yet to begin this extension with an overall body of work that does not look, necessarily strong. And when he was asked about, why you rushed into it, he said, well, it's his pedigree in the playoffs. That was 4 games. I mean, he played 4 games for the Devils in the playoffs. That sample size, sure, is good looking. But the sample size for New Jersey in the regular season, that's a sub 900 save percentage. It's not that good, and you look at goal save above expected. Yeah, okay. He does make a lot of those high danger saves that make you go, wow, Jacob Markstrom's really good. Except for the softballs, the beach balls that get past him that make you rip your hair out and say, how did that go in? So he could sometimes put the Devils in these precarious situations they shouldn't be in. And this team is so fragile that when they go down early in a game, 1-0 with, I don't know, 30 seconds, 60 seconds off the clock, now they're completely deflated. Now, I will say, in a different situation, like against the Kraken, where it was a tough start to the first period for the Devils, and Jacob Markstrom did make 5 saves in the first 5 minutes that a couple of them could have been scoring chances. that helped them, that propelled them. But it's these polarizing situations where it's like on one end of the spectrum, he's so good. And then on the other end of the spectrum, he's so 9 goals against the Islanders bad that it makes you sit there and say, okay, should we be making our number one goaltender this inconsistent guy who doesn't necessarily seem to take the reins and say, this, I got this, get on my back, we're getting to the playoffs, right? It was certainly, it didn't make a ton of sense the way he answered the Jacob Markstrom situation with saying like, well, look at his pedigree in the playoffs. You had him for 4 games. The body of work, the sample size for Jacob Markstrom in the regular season has been poor. Now, again, you in these same conversations, you have to say to yourself, well, who could have been better? Who could the Devils have gone out and gotten? I mean, I look, maybe there is no good answer for that, but what you can look at is let's think about the ex-Devils who are currently thriving right now away from New Jersey. It is Scott Wedgwood. It is Mackenzie Blackwood, which sidebar on Mackenzie Blackwood, his numbers do look good. He can't stay healthy. And it's been a tough go for him still in that department. Regardless, he's playing behind an incredible Colorado Avalanche team, as is Scott Wedgwood. And they look really, really good. Mackenzie Blackwood's struggling to stay healthy still. Would he have been as good here? I mean, maybe, probably not. You know, the Devils are not the puck possession team they used to be, and their defense is not as stalwart as it is in Colorado. But those are two goaltenders that the Devils had that are thriving. Logan Thompson, was he an ex-Devil? You could say yes, you could say no. Thriving. Like these are goalies. Vitek Vanacek won a Stanley Cup, by the way. I know it wasn't him, but you know, he in the moments that he was that he was needed, he was strong. So you know, I did talk to Fitzgerald the other day about, hey, like the coaching staff, is everyone safe? Yep. Lockstep, including the associates. Yep, lockstep. All of them. Rogalski. Yep, lockstep. Got it. What are we doing here? Rogalski. I mean, I don't know. It's clear to me that any wins that the Devils goaltenders get, you know, on the ice, any good performances they turn in is in spite of Rogalski. I'm really not sure what the chokehold is that he has on this organization, but it doesn't sound like he's going anywhere, at least not in the short term. And we'll see. We'll see. I mean, if there's any changes there, but certainly the Jacob Markstrom conversation was puzzling, and you know, we did get cut off. I didn't get to ask, you know, what of Nico Dawes, you know, who's a guy who comes up and essentially outplays, you know, outplays Jacob Markstrom when he's here. You know, he had that one start this year, was an excellent start, which was also against the Minnesota Wild. And you know, in seasons past, he's come up and he's played really well in a pinch. What about him? I mean, he's a guy who, you know, maybe you sit Markstrom for a little bit, let him get some rest and look from above and watch Nico Dawes play. Didn't get to ask that question, so you know that'll be saved for, you know, another press conference at some point, because we do expect one to happen. We expect one to happen when there's a trade or at the season's end. Like there's going to be one or two more here before then and now. So you know, that will eventually come up. He's in the final year of his contract, which is a one-way deal, by the way, and won't be eligible to just be able to sneak through back to the AHL after this season. So. You know, you wonder how the rest of the season's going to go. A couple good starts for Markstrom. You know, Jake Allen will get back in. I think he'll probably play tomorrow. You know, we'll see, but you know, the future for the Devils goaltending looks good with Yegorov and Malik. You wonder if they can maybe expedite those developments there. You know, but you don't want to, you know, obviously you don't want to rush anybody, but right now, look, you can't say the Devils goaltending is anything other than questionable right now, and that's not something I thought I would be saying coming into the season. Honestly, it's not. So, we'll see. So the Quinn Hughes situation, we spoke about this with Fitzgerald as well, and he would not speculate on what Vancouver asked for, and what New Jersey would have sent. He said the NTCs, the no trade clauses, the no move clauses, did not hamper his ability to get the deal done. He added that there would have been a way to make room for Quinn if they'd added him. Greg Wyshynski reported from December that said that they could not clear the cap space. What was the holdup if the no movement clauses were not a problem? Why is Quinn Hughes not a Devil? If they couldn't add more to it, that's, I guess, that's on Fitzgerald. I mean, you had a plethora of talent. I mean, I shouldn't say plethora. You have a plethora of blue liners that you could have added to the deal. Were you going to beat the package that Vancouver sent? Maybe not, but I mean, it sounds like they were the first phone call, and yeah, I don't know. It does not seem like it's adding up here with Fitzgerald saying, "Listen, like we could have gotten him. We could have cleared the cap space, and they just didn't. So why isn't he not here? It doesn't add up to me. Um, we'll see what happens in the future with Quinn Hughes, but right now he's not a Devil, and that's certainly just it sits directly on Tom Fitzgerald for him not being here. Then we spoke about the Dougie Hamilton situation, asked about, moving both of them. He says that, they built enough depth to have guys sitting every night. And those two players will be treated with respect. He gave Hamilton credit for playing exceptionally after being a healthy scratch, and added, and as I said, he added that he's in lockstep with Sheldon Keefe. Says he's in constant communication with ownership. Okay. Um, that's something I certainly do believe. That's one of the things I take away and say, okay, that did happen. Um, but one of the things about this whole Hamilton situation is he's constantly in communication with his agent on what they're going to do and how they're going to get through with this trade, and that there are no secrets between the two sides. So that's interesting. I mean, it sounds like they're trying to work towards something. I ultimately think something's going to happen in season. I don't think it's going to be a summer thing. It's probably better if it's a summer thing, but I think something will end up happening here. The other shoe has to drop after everything became public. I don't know if anybody is hugging behind closed doors and rectifying this. I think there are hard feelings between the two sides, and something is going to end up having to happen. So there's constant conversations with the agent. There's constant conversations happening on where he's going to go and what they're going to do. And the reports are that the Carolina Hurricanes are interested in him because, of course, they are. They're interested in everybody, which is interesting too because he was a player in Carolina at one point. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs are another team who they just lost Chris Tanev. Certainly, Dougie Hamilton does not bring the same kind of game, but I think they've identified that they could use some more offense from the blue line. So maybe that's something that they look at. Got to be careful here. You really got to be careful here because if you're moving Dougie Hamilton, you have to know that, and this is something that Dimitri said earlier. Do you get better if you trade Dougie Hamilton? It's going to be really hard to convince me that that's a yes, unless you're addressing a different need that's going to allow you to hold on to the puck a lot longer. Who's going to score the goals from the blue line is going to become the question, right? Luke Hughes has been better, but is he going to score all those goals? No. Simone Nemec is going to essentially, if Hamilton moves out, be able to play full time again. We saw what he could do earlier in the year. He gets pucks through shooting lanes very well. Could he take on that role of scoring goals, whether it be at the point on the power play or if it's 5-on-5, getting just shots through? He could probably do that, but that's going to come with some, young, I don't want to call them rookie mistakes, but some naive mistakes on a younger player that maybe Dougie Hamilton wouldn't necessarily have made. So we'll see. It's an interesting situation, but Fitz isn't sure if Sheldon Keefe has. This was an insane answer to me. You have to be, as a general manager, so tuned into your team to know where you need to add and why you need to add it. So you need to know the system that your team is playing. And whereas he might know the system that his team is playing because he watches his team, you should have known the system that your team or that the team was playing from the job he had before he came in, right? And the he I'm talking about is Sheldon Keefe. Fitzgerald said to a question that Ryan asked, are you guys playing the same system that Sheldon Keefe was having to the Toronto Maple Leafs play when he was coaching there? And he said he wasn't sure. What? You're not sure. He said he has to go back and watch, but he assumed that it's, constantly evolving, which look, that I get, right? Nothing is cookie cutter here, in the ever evolving NHL, right? I could understand saying like, that's the base, but there have certainly been changes. That would have been a better answer, right? He's evolved that system ever since, right? There are different players and different needs to play different styles. Like, okay, that's a good answer. To say I don't know, that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. So it's certainly that is something that you look at and you say, okay, that's that's a red flag. If you don't know the systems that he was playing before when you hired him, how did you know he was the fit if he is the fit? And you hope that I mean, I would think that he knows the system that they play now, and is certainly up to date on, okay, which players are going to fit this style. Because if he doesn't know, then how can he be the guy to go out and trade for certain players? That's a slippery slope that you're hoping that the Devils are not going to go down. Um, so the Dougie Hamilton saga gets a little bit deeper, and that through all of this, you're in a tough situation right now, right? The only thing that can salvage this Dougie Hamilton situation, if he does end up getting traded, is just that you continue to win. They've started winning some games of late. Two games that they won in back-to-back fashion against the Kraken and the Minnesota Wild. Um, but the only thing that is going to fix this Dougie Hamilton situation is just winning games. And if you win games, that sparks positivity. That sparks growth. That sparks good development from some of these younger guys like Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec that you want to see. So we'll see how it goes from here. But where do we go from here with the Dougie Hamilton situation? Steve Warrior had a very creative suggestion with the Dougie Hamilton contract. He would essentially be a rental for this season. By the way, if you didn't listen to the Steve Warrior conversation from a few weeks ago, please make sure to do that. Former AGM of the Florida Panthers who visited with us a few weeks ago. So if you go back to our videos, our live videos, you can check that episode out. But he wrote something interesting for Puckpedia where he would essentially be a rental, meaning Dougie, for another team that acquires him, paying his signing bonus on July 1st and either trying to make his contract work, or trade him when the money he is actually owed is a lot less. Essentially, it's, hey, we want to help Dougie escape New Jersey and join another team for a cup run. So you can get him with his bonus paid wherever that is. And after that, if you can't make it work with our cap, we need to know that you'll let us arrange a graceful exit, or which is a nice way of saying terminate his contract. And look, some of the teams that I think could use a guy like Dougie Hamilton, we already said Toronto, we already said the Carolina Hurricanes. I would add Utah to that mix. I think that they need a right shot defenseman, someone of stature. I would say Dallas. I've had a hunch on Dallas for a long time. I don't know if they can make that work. And maybe the Seattle Kraken, who have been very, very hungry for some sort of superstar talent there. Obviously, Dougie is not a superstar anymore, but we don't have to tell them that, right? You kind of hope that the Seattle Kraken are buying what he's selling. Um, According to Pierre LeBrun, on yesterday, they're actively still trying to make this trade happen. Two angles: yes, trade him now, clear the cap space. No, don't trade him now, trying to make the playoffs. It's a very slippery slope. Look, there's a lot that goes into these decisions. You want to make sure that you're still taking steps towards the playoffs. And trading Dougie Hamilton seems counterproductive. You have to make sure you're making the right choices after you trade him, and whether that's adding a top six forward. I don't. It's hard for me to say adding a third line center after trading Dougie Hamilton is going to just negate and make the Devils the team that they need to be, because now you're gonna not be able to transition the puck from the blue line as well as you are maybe right now, which isn't really saying much because they're not really doing it all that well, except for the past couple of games where Dougie Hamilton's been really, really strong. But again, it is one of those things where you have to be careful. You just have to make sure you're pushing the right buttons. And if you're going to push the wrong buttons and completely derail this team, look what's happening with the Rangers right now. They make those trades. Trouba, or they waive Goudreau, which again, Goudreau's not like a core piece, but this is a similar situation, where they trade Trouba, they cut Goudreau, they circumvent the trade protection there. They trade Kreider this summer. Like all those core pieces are gone, And now they're sending out a letter on January 16th waving the white flag. You don't want that to be the Devils, right? And if trading Hamilton is going to help you, then yes, you do it. But if it's going to hurt you, then you don't do it. And it's a really, really fine line between help and hurt here with Dougie Hamilton. All right. So let's talk about one other item that was, interesting to me in the Fitzgerald presser. Again, we said that he explained the no trade, no move clauses did not hinder his ability to do anything. I think we hit all the points in that conversation with him as well, except for when he was asked about Gritsuk getting an extension, which he unequivocally said, yes, that's something that we are willing to do, we want to do, and we're going to do moving forward. Those talks, by the way, I can confirm have not started yet, but they want to start them perhaps, over the Olympic break. That's something that the Devils have thought about doing. But I can confirm that the talks have not started, even though the Devils want to start them. They haven't done that yet. The Olympic break might be when those conversations begin. The follow-up to that question was on Simone Nemec. And the answer was different. I had said follow up on the Gritsuk question. Nemec needs a contract too. Is that something you guys are thinking of? And his answer was he needs a contract. And he kind of left it at that, with some filibuster, with some fluff. And my takeaway from that answer was we will move this guy if we get the chance to move this guy in the right deal, right? Of course, but we'll move this guy. And it was not the same answer as Gritsuk, who was, yeah, we're pleased with him. We want him moving forward. He might be a core piece. And that's something that we're looking to do. And Nemec was like, yeah, he needs a contract. We'll see. Far different answers to me, far different. So just you could read the body language, you can feel that vibe was different, and that was my takeaway from that. So that's certainly interesting for sure with the Nemec situation, because again, I thought he was starting to play his way through becoming a core piece. I shouldn't say core piece, but a key piece, right? He looked really strong at the beginning of the year, and now he can't stay in the lineup. Whether that's his fault or not, hard to say. He was injured. He comes back at an awkward time where the Hamilton thing's happening, and the Kovacevic injury is no longer. So he comes back at a weird time. But oh man, I'd be lying to you if I were to sit here and say like I would be surprised if he was not on the team next year. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be if they can make it the right deal. So, all right, that's all I got for the notes here, Sean. Let's get to some questions from the chat. Pull it up here, up on the big screen, which I'm looking down at my laptop now, and I'll read them here, Sean. But let's pull up the first few questions we have from the chat about the Devils and so far the season that is. We got a question here, Sean. Am I here by myself? Or am I looking at? Oh, okay. There, Sean tells me they are here in my notes because he did that live. Excellent. Thank you, Sean. At Rick Roma says, do you think Nemec has any resentment towards Luke? Nemec is a healthy scratch again and was buried in the AHL, while Luke has never been and maybe should have been. Nemec might need a change of scenery. What are my thoughts on that? No, I don't think there's any ill will there. I don't think there's any resentment. Certainly has Luke Hughes maybe been treated a bit differently because of his last name. I mean, I know people speculate on that, and certainly, perhaps he would have been benched once or twice had his last name not been Hughes. But again, I've been on the record. I said this a few weeks ago that I'm not on the the Luke Hughes train of he's no good. I think he was put in a couple of precarious positions this year. I think that he also missed a full training camp. I've spoken to several people since, the game where he deposited 2 pucks into his own net, who have said, like, look, we're still very high on him. He's young. These kinds of mistakes happen, which are all understandable. And I understand that. Is he going to be Quinn Hughes? Maybe not, but can he still be that elite number one defenseman that the Devils need? A lot of people say yes. So I'm not there. But does Nemec have resentment? I don't think he does. It's left side, right side. It's not like Luke Hughes is stopping him from playing, right? There is Dougie Hamilton, there is Brett Pesce, there is Jonathan Kovacevic here now. It's not like it's Luke Hughes' fault. So no, I don't see any resentment there. Thank you for the question. Up next, Captain THC says, I think Nemec will be a big trade chip to land a big fish during the offseason. He's going to want to get paid, and Fitzgerald won't have the cap room for a bunch of expensive defensemen. And I think that's a good assessment from you there, Captain THC, because like I said, the answer I got from Fitzgerald when I asked if there was going to be a contract extension or at least talks of one to begin soon, it was like deer in headlights. Wasn't expecting that question for some reason. I don't think he was. And the answer was just kind of like, yep, he needs a contract. We'll see. Whereas for Gritsuk, it was like, no, he's getting a contract. He's staying. So, and look, I do think he could be part of the equation for a big trade, right? This is a guy who was drafted second overall. He's touted as a two-way guy. He can clearly score. He's shown the ability to do that in clutch moments. So I do think that that's an astute observation. He could be part of a trade in the offseason for a big piece. I could see that happening. So I don't think that happens now. I think that they need, Simone Nemec now, unless there's something huge that they can't pass up, right? Don't ask me why Jason Robertson will become available, but if he is, right, you're offering up a Simone Nemec for that as part of the deal. So, but certainly I agree with that assessment. I think he could be part of a bigger deal at another time. Next question, at Kyle Dormus 7768 says, this team is not winning a cup. Maybe make the playoffs, not saying throw the season away, but realistically get a big fish top six like Robertson in the summer, which is something I just said, right? I don't think he becomes available in season, but you see what is going on with him in Dallas right now. Dallas doesn't necessarily have the cap space to sign him because they have these other big contracts. I can't begin to fathom why he's not on Team USA. The scouting report on him is that, like Dimitri said, he's built in a lab. He does all these great things. One conversation I've had with somebody said that, like, he doesn't necessarily do the dirty areas. He's kind of out there putting himself in scoring positions and everything, which is great. But, he doesn't have that fight to him. That certainly would be one red flag, but I think the green flags outweigh the red. So it's, you get a chance to get a 40, 50 goal scorer in Jason Robertson, you do it. Look, I think this team can still make the playoffs. I think that they need to add to do that. But if you're sitting there and weighing your options of, okay, we kind of have an idea that we can get Jason Robertson in the summer versus we can get Steven Stamkos now and make the playoffs and be a first round exit against Carolina, it's a very hard conversation to have with, internally to say, like, do we do this or do we not do this? But you probably err on the side of Robertson as opposed to win now and go get Stamkos. I mean, anything can happen once you get into the playoffs, right? But we know time after time that hill the Devils can't quite get over is the Hurricanes, and at some point you're going to meet them in the playoffs if you're going to go on a run, even if it's not in the first round. So it's a tough conversation, but I would certainly this summer, if they don't end up getting this big pristine top six forward right now, yeah, take a look at that Jason Robertson situation, because that's somebody who would fit in like a glove here in New Jersey. At Mark Chernoff says the Devils have more money tied up in their defense than any other team in the league, and I think that's a calculated thing because one of the issues the Devils had over the past couple seasons was goals going in their own net, not goals being scored, right? Having a couple of conversations with Fitzgerald over the past few years, he's countless times have said, what's our problem right now? Keeping pucks out of the net, right? Not scoring goals. We score like 3.5 goals a game. I'm not concerned with our goal scoring. And for some reason, it's reversed itself this year, essentially. And they are allowing a lot of goals now. And some of it's on the goaltending, some of it's on the defense. But what the Devils did essentially was they wanted to shore up their blue line and try to make sure that they were playing well in front of their goaltenders. And there are some underperformances happening there. That's part of the issue. But there is a lot of money tied up in the defense, and I don't think that's by mistake. I think they did that because they wanted to ensure that, one, they had a stalwart blue line, which we see they don't have, and two, they wanted to continue to develop these young guys in Luke Hughes and Simone Nemec and get them, that NHL time. So certainly is an astute observation by you, Mark, that they have the most money in the league tied up on defensemen, and yeah, they got to do something about that. And look, as soon as when they do trade Dougie Hamilton, that number is going to significantly drop. There's a conversation here happening between Captain THC and Jay Snow that Captain THC says Luke would be considered our number one defenseman. Jay Snow says, yes, unfortunately, he's not and might never be one. Captain THC says, look at Debbie Downer over here. Kid is still just 22. Be patient, grasshopper. Some playful banter. I appreciate that. And Jay Snow says, it's the reality knocking of him. And if it's reality, it's not knocking him if he becomes a really good number two. Oh, okay, sorry. So Jay Snow is essentially saying he could become a really good number two as his reality that he sees. And Captain THC says, you need to listen to yesterday's pod of The Sheet where Jeff interviews Brian Burke. And he said GMs normally only talk to media in the beginning of the season when trades happen and end of year. Quick pause on that. Yes, that is true. However, when the season goes in a spiral the way it has, look, on the daily, Sheldon Keefe's taking it on the chin, not necessarily critiquing him, but he's answering these hard questions. Like, oh, look, we're a small group of media members, but we're no pushover, right? We're gonna address the issues. And Sheldon Keefe takes it on the chin every night. Luke Hughes comes out after getting booed off the ice and faced the media. Nico Heischer's out there every night and faces the criticisms and the questions, and you can see the looks on his face when he's like, I don't want to answer this anymore. I don't want to talk about this anymore, but he has to, So having those same guys roll out over and over again every night with essentially no answer, eventually someone has to talk about what's going on, and it's got to be the guy who built the team. How much longer could Sheldon Keefe and Nico Hischier roll out the same cliches over and over again without some sort of accountability check? And so, whereas I do understand, if the season was progressing well, like, no, of course, Chris McKinnon over in Colorado hasn't spoken yet mid-season because what's there to talk about? Yeah, we're great. We're great. Things are going well. But when things are going really bad as they are for the Devils, where they expected to be in the playoff picture and in the playoff position currently, you have to talk about it. It's just, even if you say nothing, you just have to get in front of it. So I do understand that. You could have gotten Zeev Buium at the time, and we had a lot of D-men like him. It made more sense to get Silayev, right? Which that is a pretty good observation. I do understand you could have gotten Zeev Buium, but you have Luke Hughes, you have Simone Nemec cut from the same cloth. But Silayev is not here yet. He wanted to finish his development in the KHL, and I think he is coming to North America after his contract in the KHL, so that'll be interesting to see. I know there's a lot of talk about him. I don't pay everyday regular attention to the KHL. A lot of talk about his development over there. Is he lighting up the score sheet? No, but I don't think he was drafted to be that guy. You're thinking and I'm not saying he's going to be as good as, I'm just saying the kind of player that he's going to be. You're thinking Zdeno Chara. Like, you're thinking that's the kind of guy you want him to be. And if he scores no goals, but is also like a shutdown guy like Jacob Slavin, great. We're not having this conversation anymore. So you could have had Buium. Perhaps Silayev, which I believe he was part of the conversation in having a Quinn Hughes trade happen, is in that deal. It just didn't happen. And there are other pieces though, like the Ogrins and the Marco Rossi's. I think Marco Rossi was actually the player in the draft with Alexander Holtz that did not pan out. Right? Holtz did not pan out. Rossi's a good player. So that's the player that you wanted. Jay Snow says also could have gotten Markey way cheaper. If you mean current contract, I do agree with that. If you mean by way of trade when they traded for him, I think that was probably the going rate. And Kevin Ball is like whatever, and they gave up a first round pick, so it is what it is. But if you mean extension, certainly, I think with more patience and letting this season play out the way it did and the way it has, you could have gotten Markstrom at maybe $3.5 million instead of $6, or $2.75 million, like something like probably not any more than $4. right? Nothing more than 4, and I think everybody would have been happy with that for 2 seasons of Jacob Markstrom. But to have him at the contract that he's having now, um, yeah, that's not it. I'm hitting my microphone. Sorry. So you could have had him cheaper if he had shown more patience, certainly. At John757 says that the Markstrom extension was the most puzzling thing to me. Fitz did not have to a coherent response when challenged about the signing, and 6 million. I've not questioned a signing like this since Palat. And yeah, again, well said. It's one of those things where, like, it was brought up to him like, hey, you didn't have to rush into this. Why did you? And look, he's right when he says, like, he's been talking to his agent about this for a long time. That's true, right? I have no reason not to believe that that's the truth. But the fact is that you probably should let the season play out. You probably should have had more patience. Like, he's super patient when it comes to, okay, we need to make a move here, but I don't want to make a move for the wrong player. He's super patient there, but he did not show the same patience when signing Markstrom. And I understand the overall body of work, but the fact of the matter is that he's 35 and he's not getting younger. These struggles aren't. I don't think these struggles are going to get reverse themselves. And look, there are certainly. You look at guys like Marc-Andre Fleury, who played into his 40s. Could he improve at age 35? Like, I'm sure there are things that he could improve, but does anybody have any faith in that being the case with Dave Rogalski as the goaltending coach? It's just not a reality right now. So it's certainly a puzzling move. And especially, like you said, since the Palat contract was not a good one either. So um Captain THC says you guys are so pissed at Fitz this season, but should really be happy we do not have a GM as bad as Chris Drury. Yeah, that letter was like copy paste, right? It was very interesting. Drury has not given Ranger fans. My brother's a Ranger fan, and my uncle's a Ranger fan. He has not given the Rangers faithful any reason to be faithful. Lafreniere looks like a bad choice. Traded Capo Caco. All those core pieces are gone now, and Truba and Kreider. He hasn't been able to push the right buttons there. Essentially, it seems to me like anybody not named Adam Fox and Igor Shesterkin are going to be available. So you wonder. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes back if they can do some sort of expedited retool. I, I don't know. But the one thing that the Rangers do have on their side, which is why Artemi Panarin signed there, is because they're New York. Players want to play for an original six team. Players want to play for major markets, and the New York Rangers are that. So you're going to see some guys move out there, right? Panarin's probably not going to be back. You wonder about Vincent Trocheck, who, by the way, would be a perfect fit for the Devils. That'll never happen, unless he goes somewhere to another team and then they end up trading him again. But there's going to be a lot of moving parts there, and I do think that Drury has had certainly made some mistakes over there, certainly. But to compare him to Fitzgerald, who's been worse, it's tough. It's tough. I think that Fitzgerald's done a lot of good things too. I don't look at Chris Drury's tenure as Devils GM. I'm sorry, as the Rangers GM, and say he's done anything amazing. I think the Shesterkin contract was like, duh, you were going to do that. But Lafreniere, yikes. The return on Truba, yikes. The return on Kreider, yikes. I mean, there's a lot that was disappointing for Chris Drury for sure. So, whereas I think Fitzgerald has done some good things, certainly. So, we move on. Last question here, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching today's show. At Jay Snow says, "Do you think the Devils make the playoffs this year?" That's a great question. It's a hard question. I need to take a sip of water. It's a hard question. It's a hard question. My gut says no. My heart says yes, right? Side note, I grew up a New York Islander fan, right? So I have no attachment sentimentally to the Devils. My heart says yes because I do like a lot of the players on the team who I think should be able to compete in that situation. My head says no, unless they make these crazy moves that make this team less fragile. I just think that they're too easily pushed to the side. I think they're too easily hurt. I think they're too easily distraught. I think they're too easily discouraged. I think the goaltending is too inconsistent. I think the defense is too leaky. I think the scoring is not there. Um, do they make this magical trade and get the goal scorer of their dreams? That would help. Do they, for some reason, make a few different kinds of trades? Does Jonathan Kovacevic, let's start here. Does Jonathan Kovacevic stabilize the blue line? And suddenly, him and Jonas Siegenthaler return to the defensive pairing of old? Okay, now you're starting to speak my language. Can Jacob Markstrom be better? Those are major questions you have to ask for this team to make the playoffs. It's certainly an unknown, an uncertainty right now, but they've given me no reason to believe yet that they can be a playoff team. Ask me this question again right before the Olympic break. Let's revisit that one. As of right now, I'm going to say no. I have not been given any reason to believe that they can dig deep and go on this run and return to form from the beginning of the season. I think the beginning of the season, there were really good vibes. Now, injuries and all that stuff plummeted them. And so I don't know if they have the, for lack of a better term, balls to to make it through the rest of the season, digging deep and pushing through in a run to the playoffs. Look, they have the talent. They have the talent. I'm not questioning the talent. I'm questioning the heart. I'm questioning the ambition. I'm questioning the grease, the fight. I'm questioning all that. I didn't see it a ton this year, and I don't know if you're going to just have it now, just because the Devils have won a couple games. Like they could easily lose the next few games. After, let's say tomorrow, Carolina comes in and pummels them. That's it. I I think if the Carolina comes in and pummels them tomorrow, it's just a foreshadowing thing. I think it'll discourage them. That's the kind of vibe I get from this team. So, ask me now, I say no. Ask me in 2 weeks, we'll see. And that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of the Devils Rink Report. Thank you so much for watching. Please do us a favor, like the show, subscribe to the channel. The faster we get to 1,000 subscribers, the faster you can listen to us in your cars. I am James Nichols signing off on this January 16th edition of the Devils Rink Report. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next week.